and you can make it much, much closer to this, and he was ready to go. All of the first graders in his critique group sat on the floor like you guys are, and they decided to split their advice into two kinds. First, just the shape of the wings. And then when the shape was right, they'd give him advice about the pattern inside the wings. Alia, what would you say?
You can make it much pointier.
Good. These wings could be much pointier. Who else would add something? Atak, what would you say?
How about the angle? Because, not to be mean about
Yes.
the angle, it's just not exact, so...
Okay, so show me. Come on up here, Atak. Show me what you would ask him to do slightly differently.
See, it's
to
confirming.
make it a little longer.
Longer where? Draw where you would do it.
Right there.
Okay, so pull this out longer.
Yeah.
That's very specific, Atak. Thank you. Jamila, what would you say?
It's like triangle.
Good.
Analogies.
Jamila, I love
great
that.
way
So
to
you're
get
saying
feedback.
more like a triangle shape. And I agree. Well, you know what? Those first graders came up with most of those same ideas. And do you know what Austin said? He said, okay, I'll go try. And he went back to his seat and he drew this.
Is that an improvement?
Does this look
Okay.
more like a triangle?
Remember that.
Yeah. Did he go out further, like Atak was suggesting?
Yeah.
Did he add some jaggedness here,
Yes.
like Cindy? Did he get rid of that bottom thing?
So we're
So
confirming whether
he
or not
did
feedback was
listen to
actually
his
heard and
friends, and he
applied.
made it better. It's not perfect. Toby, what would you say?
I'd say don't put those little tail things so pointed in. I'd say put them more pointed down.
Good. Okay, Ethan, what would you say?
I think you should make the wings like this, not like this.
Okay, he listened to his friends, and they said, this is really a lot better, Austin. That second draft really is better.
Maybe you can make a third one.
Good. Maybe he could make a third
That's
draft.
Hadley. She likes drafts.
And so he did this draft.
That's the third draft.
That's his third draft, Hadley. That's just right. Elijah, what do you notice there?
Well, one wing's more pointed than
What do you
the other,
notice is
and
one of the greatest
that
moves
side
of
is
all.
a little bit higher than the
Good. Coburn?
Right here, it doesn't have the inside thing still.
Okay, needs a little bit more of that notch. So, do you think maybe he should do a fourth draft?
Yeah.
Now they're
Well,
excited
that's
about
just what he
drafting.
said. He said, shoot, okay, I got round again. I'll go back and do a fourth draft.
Listen.
He listened. Does
They're
it look more
marveling
even
that
like
child
Elijah was
listened.
suggesting?
Yes.
Yeah, and does it look like it's coming out a little sharper, like Cindy was suggesting? And like Attack was saying, it's a little, the angle looks a little better. So now Austin was feeling really good. He said, am I ready to add some pattern? And they said, okay, why don't you try adding some of the pattern? And he did it.
Oh, he's good at it.
He is so good.
And then they said, Austin, you're ready for color. Let's look at his last draft.
Pretty good for a first grader.
And what do you think? Did it come out really good?
Yeah.
Yeah. Let me show you where he started, just to give you a quick
So now we
reminder.
go back to
And
the
then,
beginning to see how you progress.
what do you think about how much progress he made? And Tak, what would you say about his progress?
He made like a lot of progress. He persevered doing it. His friends were honest with him.
What was it about the kinds of advice that they gave that allowed him to get better each time? Hassan?
Well, they told him what was wrong about it.
Did they say it's just wrong, or were they more specific than
They
that?
were more specific, but they weren't mean about it.
Great.
He
Hadley.
made 6 drafts.
And so is that something that other kids should learn from? What should we learn from that?
He can make other drafts if it's not right.
Good. So if it's not right, you can keep doing more drafts to make it better.
You just don't use things in your head. You want to use a sharp eye.
Good. He used the eyes of a scientist.
So I'm going to pause here, and we'll continue after this. But notice that I actually show you the big picture of your progress made visible. I showed the stages you went through, and I said, what decisions did you make that allowed you to get to here that you didn't achieve before? What would you do differently next time you had to do it? What did you learn about yourself as a learner? And the kids learn about this, and they realize it's not so bad when I get critiqued, because then I can just improve it. And I go on about it better, and I far exceed my initial one. See the very top left one? I thought that was what I did with butterflies. Look what I can do with butterflies now. It's incredibly engaging, and kids own it when they do the heavy lifting of feedback. They self-monitor. So I am always about, I ask you questions, what do you notice? Tell me about this. I don't have to have the answers myself. I get them to do the heavy lifting. Wow, do they start caring and we get rid of this learned helplessness. Well guys, I remember where I was in 2014 when this came out 10 years ago. I remember with the people with whom I was sitting. We started reading the research. It was an English class, and the same lessons, the same descriptive feedback, but the experimental group, they added one sentence. I'm giving you feedback because I believe in you. That was it. Well, that year, those kids did much better. They saw the positive feedback, not a threat from feedback. They didn't cringe when it happened. But I want to point out something to you that maybe you may not have caught. So it was my green rectangle on the slide. A whole year later, those kids were doing better. Because how can I possibly learn unless they get feedback and critique on where I am? And it started really a positive trend. I'm going to remind you that judgment, letter grades, percentages, rubric numbers, shut it down. We kind of avoid. We don't want to put it out there. It makes us vulnerable. But man, just feedback, that's something we don't have to tolerate, it works really well. So on the left-hand side, this is stuff to avoid. By the way, I've done every one of them at some point in my career. Try not to do them anymore if you're there for this. What should you be doing? Anything that creates the student as the agent of learning. So look to the middle and the right, you'll see a few ideas there. Is the student the agent of learning, or is the teacher the agent? You want the student to be. Now, let's see if you really get it. Top bullet or bottom bullet? Which one is the student perceived as the agent of learning? Top or bottom? Oh, bottom, yeah. So I'm not going to go in with a Band-Aid. You made all these mistakes. Here's what you're going to do to fix it. There's a thing called the Goldilocks principle or sweet spot. Basically, I give you enough feedback that you have a direction, but you still have some decisions to make. But not so much that I do all the work for you. You hear that? That sweet spot? Let's do the second one. Top one or bottom one? Which one is the student, the agent of learning? Any ideas? Yeah, I'm a creature of habit. It's the bottom one too. Every one of these is a no-no for one reason or another. I've done every one of them. So what I'd like for you to do is bounce your eye through them and see if any of them look familiar. But for example, needs work, try harder. That's not specific. Feedback we're talking about is very specific about their craft and understanding and very specific about the outcome. Try harder, I have no idea what that looks like. That's not actionable. It's too generic. So these are no-nos. See if you recognize yourself or maybe some teachers you once had. Notice some of these impugn character. You never talk about the character of a kid. The feedback will fall on deaf ears. They'll self-preserve. They'll find it threatening. They'll get defensive. So I want to keep it, I want to talk in a way that the conversation stays open. The dialogue continues. So we never talk about, we only talk about learning, we don't talk about the person in that learning. So this is from student-led conferences, which I highly recommend as a way to go with this. But you can have any age student. I asked this of first graders. I asked this of high school students, like you see there on the screen. But basically, what worked for me, what did not, what will I change if I were to do this again, that sort of thing. It's getting metacognitive. It really is helpful for the kids to own their learning and not keep deflecting and making excuses. So, in case you were interested, I do a little like 1 hour, 90-minute kind of training on student-led conferences, but so do a myriad of other people. You don't need me, and there's some books I can recommend to you. But if you want to get started with this, have a student-led conference in math, a student-led conference in science, social studies, or religion. These are ways that you can store kids' work where they have to reflect on the standards and what they're representing online. So there are apps and links to do that. This second slide, these are all really cool articles on how you start and maintain student-led conferences. So if you want me to do something virtual for you, I'll be glad to do that. But just understand, yeah, it's worth getting started and stuff. And this is for a variety of grade levels, what you see here on the screen. I said this before, but now you have a slide. comment on decisions, not quality of the work. Because decisions are very hopeful. I made this decision, I got that outcome. I make this decision, I get that outcome. There's hope and I'm in charge, I have agency. But when you talk about quality of work, too slippery slope into judgingness. Judgment. So I told you about the Goldilocks principle down below, and I already mentioned what you see above in the gold or yellow print, that you want to give feedback in like 2 or 3 moments, not 7 or 9. Because of the bandwidth and cognitive load theory, they'll learn none of it. So I will do feedback for 2 or 3 things, make sure that's all shipshape, then I'll do feedback on another round, okay? This is just a review slide. This slide, the one that follows, these are some of those starter stems. And I'm gonna suggest you memorize like 5 of these between this slide and the next one, or maybe something from instructional coaching. I have actually like 20 slides with different examples of things. But like, I love, tell me about this. I do that like all the time. Or I love this one. I pitch back. This is how this comes across. Is that in alignment with the criteria for success, or is that what you wanted? No? How would you like to change it so it gets to what you want? That's me giving feedback. One of my favorite forms of feedback is a dot. What? Cartoon eyeballs or a single dot. I've used both of them over the years. And what I do is, in your math algorithm, you messed up. I just put a dot in the geographic region, but not literally right next to it, of where you messed up. And I don't explain anything. Oh, in your writing, in your computer code, or some project, I'll put a dot. Or cartoon eyeballs, depending on what works with your kids. Then through modeling, self-talk, think aloud, the kid has to figure out what's wrong and fix it. If I edit their work, I learn a lot. Wait a minute. Whoa! I'm the teacher. I already know it. The goal is that they learn it. So here's the deal. Nobody in this room ever again is to circle a word and write SP next to it for a spelling error. Do not put a vertical line through a horizontal one because it should have been a +7. They forgot to check their signs when working with integers and they left it a -7. Oh! I'm just going to put it down to this. Whoever does the editing does the learning. Remember that. So if I edit their work, they're like, oh, thank you, I don't know what I was thinking, I was so careless, this looks so much better, thank you. But they'll still make the mistake down the road they want to internalize. If they find their own mistake and correct it, they will internalize and never make that mistake again, and they'll be far more vigilant before they submit the next thing to you for review. So I'm going to ask you to strongly consider, I might not do 1 through 35 odds. I might do like 7 math problems for homework, but I do this dot thing. And the kids have to go back and make the changes, whatever, or instead of a 3 or 4 page writing, it'll be half a page of writing, but I have this dot thing. Because I don't want it to look like a caterpillar wallowed in an ink pad and did the cha-cha across the page, or a machine gun with that. That's overwhelming to adults. Don't want to do that. So I'm going to suggest you get really good at asking questions where the kids do the heavy lifting. One of them is just a dot, or one of these, in these 2 slides, you'll see some more there if you like. And then you never telegraph what your opinion is. It's Dragnet. For those of you who remember Dragnet, just the facts, ma'am. That's all that is. No emotional distortion. So you're running the hurdles in maybe a track team. I'll do this. Hey, you cleared 8 of the gates of the hurdles, you knocked over 2. What did you notice about where your knee was when you knocked over those 2? What would you like to adjust when you run it again in 4 minutes? I never said good run. I never said bad run. That's me assigning a characteristic, an attribute, a trait, a judgment. Don't do that. So I'm going to ask you to think about Snow White and the mirror. Outside of Snow White, nobody judges you, only Snow White. You judge yourself looking in the mirror. So if I were really doing the feedback the way we're talking about, I would see myself as a mirror and I would reflect back to kids what they did. I noticed you did this, this, and this. Is that what you wanted? Will that lead to your success? How close is that to the exemplar of excellence given? What would you like to change in order to get closer to that point? That's feedback that they will receive. So you could be brilliant at feedback, but if they don't receive it, then it's kind of a waste of time. So the examples you're about to see, the green font, that's the statement of fact, no opinion. The white font is the result of doing that, okay? So this is the structure I recommend. We've actually done 3 of these already this afternoon. So try to find one you haven't seen yet. And just get a sense of the structure. Point and describe. Got the basic idea? Well, wait, this is teacher to student. You know what's even better? When the students do it for themselves while you're standing next to them or sitting with them at their table. So here are from a variety of grade levels and subjects. The green is the statement of fact without opinion, and the white is the result of that decision. Take a look. So I look at somebody's musical performance or art performance and I go, tell me more about that. Where do you think you kind of met the musical dynamics? Where might you have wandered? That's getting the kid to step up to the plate rather than sitting passively. Well, I do it with teachers. So I walk into your class and I go, wow, your lesson was so engaging. That's judgy. That's not helpful. You will not be validated in your craft. But what if I was so respectful and so honoring of you, I was specific. I noticed you did blah, blah, blah in your teacher techniques, and as a result, this happened. That is validating. This teacher will walk on cloud 9. I would if I was this teacher. So give it a read. So, how about some techniques? Does this look familiar? I was standing over here when I did this. But read the 2 questions up there. That's a form of feedback. Do you see how it looks familiar? What are you supposed to be learning? Where are you in relation to that? Yeah. I was working with all the math teachers in the state of Kansas for the affiliate of NCTM. And these are examples where the kid writes a letter or does an interview. Here's how what I did matched the exemplar, the evaluative criteria, whatever. And here's how it's different. And then here's what I need to do to close that gap. And together on this webinar we did, just a couple of years ago, we came up with other questions that are very similar to this and as a group. So I offer this to you as another form or another technique to do. Point and describe is what I did with the green and the white font statements. Now I will tell you that I stole that from Teaching with Love and Logic. You see the authors up there? They were in the room one time when I left the slide up during a break, and one gentleman came up to me and said, perhaps I should introduce myself. I'm David Funk. And I'm like, oh, you're like my hero. This is so wonderful. Thank you for coming. Oh, is it okay if I use your stuff? He said, no, I love it. They developed that for classroom discipline, classroom management. And I'm using it for academics. He was so taken with that, he said, well, can I borrow your slides for my presentations? I was vetted by the Funk Master. It was awesome. So yeah, you can do that. The one down below, that's the most common format for everybody in all the education associations around the world. What is your goal? What's the standard? Where are you now? That's your status. What are you going to do to close that gap? That should sound pretty familiar. This one, do you recognize what it's going to be? I just talked about it moments ago. Yep, you put a dot or cartoon eyeballs. You do not explain anything about it. Well, a variation on that theme, Paganini, we like to bring in fine and performing arts where we can, of course, is that you actually do highlighting. I highlight your mistake, but I don't say anything about it. It might be you didn't put centimeter squared, you just left it the number. No, you have to put the units of measure, okay? Whatever it might be. But here's the deal. You could use different color highlighters. So the orange one is about vocabulary concern. So now I'm looking at vocabulary. Maybe the green one is about understands rational numbers. And the yellow and purple one is something else. This comes from a wonderful video that is 17 minutes long we're not going to see. It's a math class. However, I show it to art teachers and PE teachers and every other grade level possible. It's a middle school math class, just so you know. And it's called Highlighting Mistakes of Grading Strategy. If you just type in that title on YouTube, it will come right up. It's also on my website if you ever want to go there because you're just too tired to look at YouTube. That's really all right. But the idea that it's highlight stuff, well, the teacher did this. She would highlight their quizzes and tests, but she wouldn't put the grade at the top. Because when she first did this, Yeah, you would look at the grade, they just give up, and they wouldn't talk about the math or any of their mistakes. So she had to force their hand. So she would grade it, but she would keep the grade off the page. Now she'd hand it back to the groups, and the kids had to work with partners and figure out why something was highlighted and make the corrections before she would reveal the grade, because she wanted to talk deeply about the math. Now it took about 2 to 3 weeks for the kids to stop saying, yeah, but what's the grade? Because everybody's indoctrinated. I need the grade to see if I'm okay as a person. That's not cool. That's like mentally ill. So you need to know you're okay. You need to talk about the math. So that helped. I highly recommend this, even if you don't teach math, or you don't even teach middle school. There's stuff in here you can use. I promise that. And then here's what, so what, now what is really popular. Yeah.
I have a question about the highlighting. What happens if you have a student, I mean, I'm only first grade, but say
Yeah.
I did that on, like phonics work.
Phonics work, a first grade class, she says.
And you get someone who has a lot of highlighting.
Has a lot of highlighting. Look how colorful my paper is. Yes, I would say if you're going to overwhelm a kid, bandwidth, cognitive load theory, that first grader may only be ready for one thing at a time. So I'll only highlight in regards to this one element or attribute. Then once that's fixed, we'll go back and I'll do a second color highlight in another round. As much as I can. If I can get away with 2 of the colors and 2 of the attributes, I might push it like that. But it really depends on the developmental level of it. I could do something that's about geometry, or something about me and my relationship with a police officer, and the student has actually created something, and I can still highlight things where there's an issue and the child has to address that. Okay? Yep.
I just looked at I was thinking of something, when I grade my essays,
Yeah?
a lot of times I will put what they missed.
Right.
And just write what they missed. Would it be better just to put?
Yeah, don't specifically outline what they missed. Just put issue here, whatever symbol you use. And so I put the dot, or the cartoon eyeball. Issue, that means they have to reconcile that before we can continue. But I give them the tools to do that. They will remember it longer for you having done that. Okay, so that's fine. Yeah, and now if you do these 6 questions, you get content examples from all over the world. Just type in, here's what, so what, now what. Then this is one of my favorites. Item analysis charts, followed by a letter. What? I don't care what it is you're teaching. You can put whatever you want at the top of the columns. In this case, I had a bunch of children who didn't know when they were careless or clueless. And I had to push that point. So we did something that I knew they already knew how to do, generally. We did a little division of fractions, reciprocals, things like that. I gave them a quiz. I did the dot thing, or actually outright graded it. You just mark the paper, whatever it is. But then you give them this empty. But you put, child-friendly versions of the standard, whatever they are, and the kids fill it out. They do the heavy lifting of the analysis of the items. So, dividing fractions, number 1. Got it wrong? Really don't understand. Number 2, dividing fractions. Got it wrong? Really don't understand. Is there a pattern developing? Yes! They fill this out. Isn't that pretty? That's great. They're analyzing all their work in light of whatever I put at the top of my columns. You can have 3 more columns going out if you want. That's really okay. But now here's the kicker. They use this to write this letter. Dear Mr. Wormeli. Now in my class, that's okay. If they use Dear Mr. Wormeli in your class, it's weird. So first thing is, I understand. Well guys, back on here, that might be smiley faces, because that's what our kids understand. It could be the green in the traffic light colors. So you can use any symbol you want here. As you do this, I just was using checks for the example. I understand. I need help in, this could be the sad face, if you want. But the third part of the letter is always the gold. I would like to suggest the following 4 things I do to learn it. Now, a lot of kids, sometimes they're young, sometimes they're inexperienced. They just don't know themselves as learners. They don't know what they need to do to learn this. So we always stop and suspend the curriculum in order to teach a life skill. That's what I tell my principal. And we say, what are 25 different ways you could learn something by yourself or with a buddy? And we brainstorm a menu list of 25 things. So they often say flashcards. Mr. Wormeli, do you have like an app that helps us practice? Yeah, I got a couple I could recommend to you. Okay, that's 2. Oh, I know. Stay after school or come early and Mr. Wormeli will let you as long as you have a car ride home. That's 3. Mr. Wormeli, you taught us 12 different graphic organizers. Could that be the next 12? No, that's one category, Lucy. Oh! They usually come up with 5 or 6, then they go, there's no other way to learn stuff. But we go to special student services portion of college websites. They often have really specific ideas I can use with 4th grade and higher. I look at ADHD and executive function advice articles and books. They have tremendous ideas on how to study for all of people. Then I look at the education sections of bookstores and garage sales for study skills books that are way more than just be organized. Not helpful. I want something very specific. How do you do that? And we make a list, and the kids get to choose from the menu. Then they sign it, I sign it, mom and dad sign it, but check it out. They did the analysis of their work against the goal. They actually wrote the letter, the program, how they're going to recover from it. They own this. And they follow through, and they grow, and they mature, and they know how to study a little bit better next time. Here's one of my favorites. Look familiar? We just did that earlier, didn't we? If you're curious, these are 5th and 6th graders who wrote these. Take a moment and read at least one, so you get a sense that it's pretty substantive. Do you think they're getting it? I think they're pretty good. All right? So now, have you guys ever watched a TED Talk where there's an animated hand drawing what the person is saying? Like on YouTube? Ever seen this? I use VideoScribe. What I did is I made 2 videos. And the videos, one's 9 minutes, one's 12. But it's all these like techniques and these principles that you can send home to families, because I want grandma, grandpa, mom and dad, aunt and uncle, anybody living in the home to be able to do feedback like this. Not overly assist, if you get my drift. There's some over-assistance and support happening here. So I need to give them some techniques, otherwise they will continue to kind of mess up on that side. But also to remind kids, so you can send it out to kids. You can also remind yourself if you want to do it. But it's me talking and it's me doing the hand drawing stuff. If you're curious, go look at VideoScribe in general. It's one word, VideoScribe. It's a cool thing. But you'll see some ideas there based on what we just did. And now we're here. So I need to remind you that we're going to run short of time. But relearning, reassessing, I want you to think about it. If I do formative assessment, and then I give you feedback, but I don't let you make it actionable. Here's the feedback, what you could have done to learn to do better, but you can't. In the same planning breath, if I give you feedback that's so instructional, I must give you an opportunity to literally go back and relearn it and be reassessed. Now, I don't call it redos and retakes because that's about compliance and doing stuff. I call it what it really is, relearning, reassessing. So what I have for you here are slides about why you would do this. I think I've sort of made the case for that quite a bit today. You want to do competence, it takes reiteration, that incompetence is never preparatory or maturing. I remind you of the bus. This is a welding school instructor who said if they know they can redo, why should they bother the first time around and study? They'll just use the test as an advanced preview and then they'll really study. But remember, that point is completely moot because I gave you a copy of the test on day 1. There are no surprises. You know exactly what's on the test. There's absolutely no reason for you to I'll wait for to actually see the test. No, you've already seen the test. You know what's on there. Secondly, no kid thinks it's a treat. They turn to each other. Whatever you do, never not study for the first time around. It's just not worth it. Never have to do a redo. It makes you neurotic. And that's another word in our vocabulary test. So understand, kids don't think they're getting away with something. They avoid redos. I have had kids in the locker area in middle school and high school go, and they didn't know I was standing behind them because I was walking up like this to all their friends. And they were saying man, Mr. Wormeli makes you do it over and over again until you learn it. It sucks. And I'm going, touchdown. I bite down and don't let go. I live in a community that feeds into my school, and I've always had a chance to do that. And I've asked the neighbors, okay, seriously, I can trust you as a friend to be honest. At the barbecue, the sports, the soccer game, whatever. What's my reputation as a teacher? Because I'm the only one doing redos in the school. And I'm worried thinking the kids will get away with things. And to a T, they have said this, oh no, if you're a slacker, you will hate the day you got Mr. Wormeli. That is your reputation. I have kids come back from high school when I taught middle, and middle from when I taught elementary, and high school or college come back from college when I taught high school, who said, I sort of hated you, but I can't thank you enough because you made me actually learn it. You did not give up on me. You said get on the bike over and over again. That's demanding. What the cop-out is, we mentioned before, is denying them a chance to redo. I also had this really strident nurse in a nursing school, and she said, let me stop you right there, Mr. Wormeli. We don't allow redos in nursing training because seconds matter in the field of war and in the ER. You have to learn to run an IV line instantly because they need their nutrients, their medicine, whatever it is, through the saline bag and continuing in the arm. They need to be able to do that without mistakes first time around. And I go, yeah, it felt like Columbo. If anybody remembers Columbo, he was a kind of a rumpled, raincoat wearing, confused detective, but he always solved it. And he'd have the heated back and forth, and go, okay, no, I see you, this is okay, this is all right. Hey, yeah, I just have one more question. And that's what it was, I just had this one question. And I said, you know what, I appreciate that. As a patient, or a future patient of a nurse, where seconds matter, I really appreciate you doing that. Can I just ask one question? How did they get so good they become registered nurses? Or licensed in the field? What? What do you mean? Did they practice on pieces of fruit? Did they practice on anatomical annies? Did they have a virtual suite where they learned some of the stuff? The first live 12 patients they had, did they have a mentor standing next to them as they applied the intravenous line? And she goes, well, yes, of course, we have to learn how to do it. That's reiteration. That's the only way they became proficient is by doing it over and over again. Those are redos. And she goes, I'll stand down, you may continue. In other words, every single branch, every profession, we've already talked about that, does demand redos. If I had Tesla, this would be more dramatic, but I'll settle for Edison. Read every word. Yeah? Yeah. So I do every single branch of military service, including Merchant Marine and Coast Guard. Usually it's Army, Air Force, Navy, Marines, but these are second career people. They had 20 or 30 years in the military, they want to go out with a great second act or third act. I also do this for engineers and scientists and accountants, software engineers, architects, and so on. They want to move into teaching as something they really do to contribute to their communities, which is just wonderful. It's really cool. Every single one of them looks at their colleagues askance. Why would you not do redos? It's the scientific method, it's the engineering style, architects do this all the time. This is the way every single profession is. This is an Air Force colonel who was in my class, and this is his Air Force colonel training manual. He highlighted it. Since I got this, I went to every single manual of every single branch of military service, minus all the redacted parts I'm not allowed to see as a civilian. And it turns out every branch of military service requires redos for full credit. You'll do it 35 times. You'll do it 20 times. You'll do it 5. Whatever it takes for you to become competent, because incompetence in the field of war, people die. So my dad's U.S. Navy, Cuban Missile Crisis Navy. To this day, I still don't know what he did. And we're also near the Norfolk Naval Base, the aircraft carriers and submarines and everything. My wife works for Navy Federal Credit Union. So we're kind of a Navy family, just so you know. If it's good enough for the United States Navy, it's good enough for us. So understand that people who have the worst time accepting redos and all the stuff I'm about to say, they're the ones that usually went to college and then went right